Hello, and thank you for watching and listening the Wine Centric show, where we talk to the titans of the wine industry, but make it all relatable for every person, no matter where on your wine journey you are. And today with me, there is no better person in this country, maybe in the world, to make wine relatable. She is Somme Vivant. She is also the host of the Wine Access Unfiltered podcast. She is noted as the top wine personality in America. She is none other than Amanda Awesome McCrossin. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Wow, what an intro. I'm flattered and I feel like I need to Google some of that information to verify its accuracy, but I'll take it.
That's what I've read. You can't believe everything you've read, but it's certainly from good sources. I'll say that.
It's nice to hear and it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. We met back in New York City when you were running the wine program for Rotisserie Georgette, I believe. And
Yes, may she rest. Running the wine program it is what I was doing, but I was a little baby Sam at that.
yeah, you were buying the wine,
Yeah, like teetering through the more accurate description.
teetering through. Yeah. It's just funny because we get lost in our own silos and whatever. And my wife was scrolling Instagram, and it was not that long ago. We were on a trip. I think we were in New York City, and we were taking a cab from the airport to the city. And she's like looking through Instagram, and she's, oh, I really like this person. Oh, and she knows about wine too. Like, I know that person. That's Amanda. I remember her. And then voila, lo and behold, you are this titan of the industry. Here you are. I want to jump right into something. Okay. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. It's like a little brain teaser, but I think that you'll be more than game for it. So what I'd like to do, I looked at the new spring menu for Press, your old stomping grounds where you were the sommelier and wine director. And I pulled 3 dishes, and you're well regarded for your pairing prowess. And I'd like you to tell me what you would pair with them if you were back on your old days, walking the floor at Press.
Okay, do I have to use, so to give a little context, I guess we'll back up, double context. Number one, when I was there, so this is totally fine. I'm happy to do it. It was a steakhouse when I was there. So it was a very different menu. And number two, am I choosing from the all Napa Valley / California wine list that also has a few other gems as well?
I'll stretch the parameters and say that you can choose from any wine anywhere in the world.
Okay. All right. This is fun. I'm ready.
You're ready. Okay.
Okay.
Right now they have Hamachi Crudo on the menu. Yeah.
Okay. Hamachi Crudo, generally lots of citrus, right? All the orangey, zesty goodness. And it's spring. So we want fresh, we want bright, maybe want a touch of floral. In a perfect world, I'm very into like sake right now, and so I go sake. But given that it's an all California wine list, I would probably go with the Mexican Sauvignon Blanc.
Oh.
Which is just like a lovely, zesty, it's got the California kiss sunshine. I would also potentially go for maybe an older Stony Hill Riesling, like with 10 to 12 years. Third choice, because it has a little residual sugar on it, Smith Madrone Riesling from Spring Mountain.
Okay, you just gave us 3 choices. That's pretty awesome.
3 choices. I know. This is the Somm in me, right? I can't help myself.
No,
It's a little taste test.
Yeah, you'd do a little flight for your guests. It's awesome. And I'm going to personally, although I love all the choices, I'm going to personally say that really love Dan Petrosky of Massican. So I'm going to go with that wine.
Yeah. Beloved by all Somms, right? I don't think there's a Somm he's run into that anybody.
Yeah, I always say I had in my day job working in wine sales, you have ride withs, of course, and people are in your car and you get to know them, and some are really good and some are just okay and whatever. That was hands down the best work with I've ever had. He's just
without it.
Yeah. Nonstop, great stories, genuine, so intelligent, really good. Have you had him? You had him on Wine Access Unfiltered, right?
Yeah, no, I've had him at least once, if not twice. And he used to be my neighbor. He's
Okay.
press all the time. We've shared many martini together. Yeah, Dan and I are great friends. And given that he used to make vermouth, he doesn't make it any longer, but a little vermouth would be nice. A little dry vermouth, which has some residual sugar, would also be nice with hamachi crudo if we want to stay in the Masakan train.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, that's so sad that he doesn't make that vermouth anymore. That was
I
really
know.
delicious.
I know. I think he was like in true Dan fashion. He was like just slightly ahead of his time. Like I think vermouth and sherry are starting to have a little bit more of a movement as people enter this low ABV phase. And now, so he should get back into it. He's got a lot on his plate.
I'm so happy you
No.
said this because this has been talk about trending topics. And maybe you're the one who set this trend, but have you seen the Moscato D'Asti trend just absolutely go bonkers? Are you experiencing that?
No, tell me, are you seeing this like on Instagram or where are you seeing it go nuts?
We cannot, in my day job, keep a half bottle of Moscato D'Asti in stock. We literally do not have one bottle. And I work for a somewhat large company. We literally don't have one bottle in stock. The restaurants that pour it and the shops, they're going through it by the caseload.
I'm not surprised.
But it's just Moscato D'Asti, right? This people think about
Deliciously
just
sweet, spritzy Italian goodness. It's delicious.
totally, and had its hip hop fame back in the 90s, right? With Moscato in the early 2000s and now, but also has great pedigree and actually is well made, comes from a great region. But I think it's an influencer or the fact that it's low ABV, the combination of that, it's crazy. I didn't know if you had your finger on the pulse of that.
No, the only pulse I have on that is I know that they did a little campaign maybe a year ago with some influencers, both in the wine and lifestyle space. So maybe it kicked it up a notch for Miss. I'm happy to hear it's having a renaissance. It's honestly when I went to school, when I was in college, I did a semester in London and I was very unfamiliar with wine. And I went to this restaurant and was with some friends and they ordered a bottle of Moscato d'Asti. And I was like, this is amazing. This is delicious. I didn't know wine could taste like this. I went home thinking like Moscato was a producer.
Mm.
Like, no, it's like a whole section of wine. And it's funny because then I think of that moment still today, but I love Moscato when people are trying to get into wine. It's one of those wines like Lambrusco or Brichetto or even like Bougie Sardin that's slightly sweet, spritzy, effervescent, reminds you a little bit of like a delicious soda in some ways, like a good way. I think is a great entree.
Absolutely. I think from Vietti, Luca Carrada's wife
Yeah.
was in town and she was saying that it's healthier and sometimes than Coca-Cola. And so sometimes for a break or lunch break, she would just go grab some Moscato d'Asti and voila.
How
There you go.
Italian of her.
Very Italian of her. Okay, let's do two more dishes. And then I want to get back to that moment of your evolution wine career. The next one, and this is pretty interesting, and the fact that it was a steakhouse, but this is not steak, the other white meat. It's a sweet and sour pig ears.
Yeah. Yeah, these are fun. I've had them. They're like the strips and they're quite like saucy and they do have a bit of sweetness to them. I think this is a dish you could go two very different ways. You could go the Riesling route for sure, brighten it up, lighten it up. But given that I'm on a bit of a Zinfandel kick right now, I think I'm going to go with Zinfandel and I'll tell you why. I'm sure you are familiar with Ravenswood, right? The OG, right? Godfather of Zinfandel, Joel Peterson, founded in the late 70s, sold to Constellation. So the origin story of Ravenswood is it was like small lot, single vineyard, really one of the first people to make Zinfandel a standalone single vineyard grape because for many decades it was blended into lots of different things, especially in California where it was just kind of field blended. And Joel plucked these out and made these great wines. And then Constellation decided to scale it and do what they did. And it became a much different wine. And you saw it on the shelves of CVS. And then since then, Gallo has now purchased it and they've taken it back to the origin days of Ravenswood. And they've brought Joel back into the mix. And so they're back to these single lot. And so I think Zinfandel, especially if it's like this Ravenswood single vineyard, could be a really delicious pairing, which Zinfandel is delicious with any sort of barbecue. But I think this specifically would be really lovely with it.
Yes, I love it. The sweet and sour nature, and then Zinfandel is just kind of fruity and everything. Speaking of which, isn't his son making Bedrock wines now? Isn't that Joel's son?
He is. Is one of my other favorites in those. Yeah. So Bedrock is Morgan Twain Peterson, who's a master of wine, and they make really delicious Zinfandels and like these heritage blends, which are a few other grapes. They also make one of my favorite California rosés, which is the Ode to Lulu, and an homage to Tempe, to Lulu, former matriarch.
I love what you're saying. Okay. I have to take a quick break here because you said barbecue. You said barbecue meats. And my favorite pairing with barbecue is bubbly. And I don't know if you've heard about this, Amanda.
No, this is
Barbecue and bubbly. So barbecue and bubbly is on 31st in Cary, North Carolina, at this unbelievable place called Fenton. It's the premier food and dining scene. It's this epic outdoor area. And we have 10 of the best pit masters and chefs doing their favorite barbecue dish. Sam Jones Barbecue, Nick Dampf, Longleaf Swine, James Sampson of Corner Boys Barbecue, lots of local greats. We're bringing in some other people, as well as Adrian Miller, the soul food scholar, is going to do a mini master class on barbecue. And then we have 20 sparkling wines, Cava, Prosecco, Cremant, Champagne, Lambrusco, you name it, to pair with them, thanks to two great local wine shops, the Raleigh Wine Shop in Luella, Durham. And I want to give a huge shout out to our media partners, Cary Magazine and Wake Living, fantastic publications. Also, thank you to Heather Donovan Realty for creating a lit kid zone that is going to set this event apart from others and make it an experience for all you families. Yo, if you want to get tickets, Amanda, you just go to the bit.ly. It's a bit.ly/BBQ bubbly, bit.ly/BBQ bubbly. I'm going to send you a gift. You don't know this yet. I don't know if you're a coffee drinker, but
I am a coffee drinker. This is cool. What is this?
yeah. So this is my Tastemaker series. I'm doing this with a local roastery called Carborough Coffee Roasters. They are local. However, they have two of 100 of the 100 cuppers. Cuppers are like the equivalent in coffee to what a sommelier is in wine. They have two of them who run their roastery in the 2 out of 100 in the world. And so they do single origin coffees. The first one we're coming out with is from Peru, Edith Meza, and it's Pacamara cultivar, and it's a natural processing. So you just Google Carborough Coffee Roasters Tastemaker series, and you're gonna get that.
Am I getting the Peruvian one?
You're getting the Peruvian one, yeah. That'll be there until we get on to the next one.
Okay, yeah, I tend to be more of I like Ethiopian, like I like a lighter, like more tea-like coffee if I'm like making a pour over, but I do love South American, Peruvian, Colombian.
Yeah,
I like all coffees if they're good. It's like wine.
exactly. I like to say you wind down at night and then you coffee up in the morning. If you're a sincere wine
I
drinker.
do not begin until there's coffee involved. I can promise you that.
Heck no. Okay. You've outshined yourself in the pairing. So we'll move on from that. You mentioned,
Okay,
yeah, thank you for that, by the way. Thank you for getting into that with me.
my pleasure.
You mentioned that moment when you were studying in London. We'll say studying. You were there. There was some education going on.
It was a loose interpretation of studying.
Yes.
Teetering, like I was with the wine list at Rochester, Georgia.
Yeah, that you are. I appreciate your self-deprecation. But so was that your gateway, that bottle of Moscato D'Asti into wine?
Absolutely not. It was a means to an end. And it was I was in London and I was very young for everything. So I graduated from high school while I was quite young and I went to college quite young. And so I was only 19 or 20 my senior year of college. So I actually wasn't a legal drinking age. So I could legally drink in London,
Yeah, they didn't care over
but
there.
not in the US. Yeah, and I didn't grow up with wine on the table. It wasn't like this thing that we did as a family. So it was one of the first wines that I had, but it was by no means like a breakthrough moment. That didn't come until later. So there was a few different moments, and it's funny. I was actually just talking about this with a friend because I remember like my mom she went to a party once, and she came back and she was like, "Oh, I had this bottle of wine. It was called Menage a Trois. And it was so delicious." I was like, "Oh, Menage a Trois. That sounds scandalous." And then it wasn't until maybe a few years after that, we went as a family to the Capitol Grill, and I think it was for my mom's birthday. And we were talking to the server, the sommelier, and I guess my dad like wanted to get a bottle of wine at that point. And I'll share a funny story about that after, but we landed on a bottle of Conundrum white wine. And I'm 30, so this is probably like 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah.
We loved it as a family. And it became the first wine that I was like, oh, this is like a fun gathering moment. And we joke now because even though wine wasn't on the table growing up, there was a moment where we almost became a wine family that I didn't learn until later. My dad had been on business in Italy and he was going around to all these different places. He was in Milan and he had wine with all of these meals and he came back and he had dinner and he ordered a bottle of Chianti. And my mom was like, what? And he was like, a bottle of Chianti. And he thought he was being fancy. And so, of course, pronounced Chianti. But my mom like shot him down in the moment, which I didn't realize. And so it never went anywhere after that. So we missed our opportunity as a family to become a wine family. Subsequently to the conundrum thing.
Wait, hold on. You never got the bottle of Chianti?
Well, I wasn't a part of this conversation. I think my parents were like out to dinner without us. So no, I didn't even know this whole conversation happened. My mom only told me this a few years ago. She's like, well, your dad was actually, he like tried to get into wine and it never really happened, probably because I shut it down and made fun of him at the moment. But no, so I don't know if the bottle ever happened or if they drank it or what the deal was, but that was like our missed opportunity.
What a sliding doors turn there.
I know. Can you imagine like the progress I would have made? But no, I was working. I went to school for musical theater and a lot of jazz hands. And I came back to Philadelphia and I was working as an actress. I had this side job at this restaurant here. And these people came in all the time to the restaurant. They went to Napa a bunch of times a year. And there was one night that they came in and they had brought a bottle of 2005 for Groff Reserve. And they were like, here, try this wine. This is amazing. I go up to New York a few years later and I try to get a job and they're like, do you know about wine? I was like, of course I know about wine. And they were like, what's your favorite wine? And I said, the 2004 Groff Reserve. And so that was how I got my job at the Core Club, which is how I got into wine and how I got to Research Georgette. So a little fake it till you make it, a little taste and rememberings of things here and there. But I do remember that Groff Reserve was quite good. And 04, of course, was a great vintage.
I feel like I just opened a 2004 Groff Reserve like over Thanksgiving or something. Groff, another great California winery.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned the Core Club because I was watching something recently where you said Arnaud, who was, I guess, the wine director there at the time, asked you 5 questions. Do you remember what those 5 questions were or what they spurned you?
I remember some of them. It was, what are the first, and mind you, I knew nothing about wine.
Yeah.
Nothing. I didn't know that Chianti wasn't a grape. I didn't know if it was a grape, it was a producer, whatever. So he had asked me, what are the first growths of Bordeaux?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what a growth was. I didn't know what Bordeaux, like I didn't know any of these things. So it took multiple steps to answer these questions. What are the Grand Crus of Chablis? And he needed me to memorize these. My one luxury in New York was I had a membership to Equinox. I had a shitty apartment, but I had a membership to Equinox. And so I remember like flashcards pedaling by trying to memorize these Grand Crus of Chablis, which I still to this day, like it's one of those things that's never left me. So those were 2 of them. It was like, what is the most expensive wine in the world? There was something about Chateau Yquem for the 5th one. But the first gross and the Grand Crus of Chablis, though, I remember those are the hardest ones. It might have been the vineyards of Beaujolais, the Crus of Beaujolais.
Okay. What year was this? Because I swear those are the questions that anytime I hired, when I was working at running BLT and I ran the hiring for the somms, that was always those questions. That if you were going to be a somm there, you had to know those basics. The 5 growths of Bordeaux, the 7 Grand Crus of Chablis, and all the Crus of Beaujolais, which that's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, that was 2000. I moved to New York when it was 2010. So it was probably like 11, somewhere in there. It's very possible.
I think he stole it from me, but you know what?
He might have.
The other thing is, let's give it up because great minds think alike. I'll just tap myself on the back here. Thank you very much.
I had all the answers though. I will say that I came back. I was a studious person.
But you weren't even applying for a wine position at that point, right? You were just trying to be a server there.
No, I was already working there. So Arnaud came on after I faked my way into that job, courtesy of a cute black dress and a smile, which apparently were everything you needed at the time to get a job there. Anyway, I won't throw in under the bus, but whatever.
Yeah, well done.
But yeah, so I know I was a server in quotation.
Yeah,
we knew what I was there to do, which is just pour rosé and like scotch on the rocks for the rich people at the Core Club. But no, Arnaud joined. He had been at Le Verdun and he joined as like the AGM, and they have no somm there. They just hired him because he knew about wine and they could probably sell some expensive wine there. But no, I was just really curious about wine. I had been always curious about wine, and I didn't know where to start because I didn't grow up in a wine household. And I've always thought of wine as this thing that's like generational wealth. Like you're either born into it or you just drink beer. And so when Arnaud joined, I said, I would like to learn about wine. Are there books that you can recommend that would maybe help me to understand wine better? And so that's when he said, I will not recommend you books. Instead, I'll give you these 5 questions. And if you come back with the answers, we'll continue the conversation. And so I didn't really know where this was going to go. Like I didn't know that I was on taking the first steps toward becoming a somm. I was still working as an actress at that point, going to auditions every day. But that was a real turning point, whether I knew it or not in my life.
What was the point where you said, okay, I'm not going to pursue acting anymore. I'm going to make wine my career?
I thought about this a lot. I'm trying to identify exactly when it was. I remember like laying in bed at night one night thinking I had the choice to go to an audition in the morning at Ripley Greer Studios or a wine tasting. And I remember like very consciously making the choice to go to the wine tasting instead, which sounds funny now. But I remember making that choice and thinking, wow, like this is really interesting. I clearly have made a choice for myself, whether that means something or not. It's something to pay attention to. And I had also noticed along the way that I was becoming increasingly more interested in food and wine. And I was reading the food section before the art section in the Times. And I was paying more attention to what was going on with different chefs in New York. And so there were clear little cues along the way. But I had been in theater and in the arts since I was a kid. I worked as an actress when I was 8, 9 years old. And so had been a very big part of my life. And my parents had always assumed that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. So there was a struggle in a lot of ways because it's like breaking up with like your longtime boyfriend or a friend or something that you've known forever and you thought you were going to be together forever. And then this other thing came along and you were like, maybe not. Maybe it is time to look in a slightly different direction. And I was 25 and someone was there to open the doors and help me through them. And I felt like I didn't have much to lose.
Yeah. And
one foot in front of the other.
I think what you're saying is right. It's like you have to grieve that part of you to decide that, yeah, the acting part of me is no longer. And it always is with you. And obviously today, you maybe don't do acting per se, but you're definitely in front of the camera and use your personality and your speaking skills and all that. So it's still with you.
Yes. It has served me well. I think it's all come full circle in a way that I never could have imagined, but I'm certainly glad to have all facets of my life intertwined again.
By the way, when this releases, happy anniversary, because this will release on April 9th. And I believe that will be your 9-year anniversary of your first Somme Vivant YouTube video.
You might be right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I always thought it was March, but you might be right. I think it is April.
Based on my research, again, I think I have good sources, but
you would probably know. I haven't actively avoided the early YouTube videos because they're a bit cringe to watch. But yeah, you are probably right. I remember starting that. And that was when Casey Neistat, if you're a YouTube lover, it was like he was vlogging every day. And so I decided that I was going to do the same. And so I bought all the gear. I taught myself how to edit. Obviously knew how to be in front of a camera. And so I put out a different video almost every day for a month. I would like shoot in the morning at a winery, edit when I got home, went to work at press, came back, finished the edit, uploaded, and did it all.
That's a great transition as to how you go from wine director, sommelier to, sorry, lack of a better word, wine influencer, public figure, let's say. Yeah, was that a plan or did it just naturally happen?
Intentional. I don't know. I think plan would be too specific a statement, but it was definitely intentional. And the intent really came from when I was in New York. I was approached to do what was called the Wine Show. And it was this show that ended up coming out and it was with like Amelia Singer and there were 2 very famous actors on it. Anyway, it came out and I was slated. I was part of the marketing materials. It was supposed to be me, Amelia, and Jeannie Jolie, who were going to be the presenters. When we were gearing up talking about different things, I gotten connected with a casting director who works specifically in like reality style TV shows. And I was asking for advice. And she said the one thing, and this is like 2012, 13, something like that. She said, the best thing you can do right now is leverage or build your social following. And this was like very nascent stages of Instagram. Like Twitter was really big at that point. Obviously we had Facebook and I didn't fully understand what she meant by that, but she was like, build your social following. Because she said, what I'm seeing is when people are coming to the table, they're leveraging their social following as a means to either get the job or get more money. And I was like, that's really interesting. And so flash forward to when I was in California, didn't end up doing the wine show. And I was like, she told me to build this social following. And I've always wanted to get back in front of the camera and make things and do content. The only way anyone is ever going to know that I can actually do this cohesive in any sort of professional fashion is to just do it myself. And so I decided to start doing these videos as an audition in some ways so that people know that I knew that I could actually do this. And then also to build my social following. And then also to just tell the stories that I was learning while I was in California, because coming from New York, as it's a very European focused area.
Yeah.
California wine was very new to me, and I was living and breathing it and living in the center of it all. And so I was going out to these wineries, and I felt like people were asking me every night, where should I go? And so it was a lot of different, it scratched a lot of different itches. But yeah, that was a reason that I did it. And whether it was a plan or not, I'm not sure. I did it the entire duration that I was sommelier and wine director at Press.
How did you get hired for Press? Because you were working at Georgette at the time. And so what spurred the move to out west?
I don't know what burr I got up my ass on that one, but I decided to start looking for jobs out in California. I'm not entirely sure why. I had looked for jobs in New York, and I wasn't super happy with anything that I was finding. And I had just seen that there was this job ad for the wine director at Bouchon in Yountville. And so this person that I was working with at Georgette, I knew that she was connected to the TKRG group. And I said, hey, I submitted my resume. Can you just ping some people, let them know who I am, whatever. Anyway, in doing that, she got connected to Scott and Kelly at Press, and they were like, don't go to Bouchon. We're actually looking for a somm. Have her contact me. And they had never posted for the position. It was just lucky happenstance once again. And so I called Scott. He was like in the middle of a vineyard, and he's like, best thing you can do is get out here and we'll see if it's a fit. And I was like, so I like scrounged up all the miles and like points that I had, bought a ticket to California, and went out like 2 weeks later. Loved it. Staged at Press for 2 nights, had the best time. Really also knew at that point in my career that I wanted to work for people who knew more than I did. You might remember I was like writing solo at Rotisserie Georgette, which in a lot of ways is great to have autonomy and buying power, but like you learn very little in doing that. The best way that I knew how to learn was by learning from other people who knew more than me. And certainly Scott and Kelly had a lot of experience and years under their belt. And so when I got out there and I felt the program and everything, I was like, you know what, this is like a now or never moment. And I got on the plane later that night. I sent an email to Scott and I was like, hey, if you'll have me, I'd love to be out here. And he was like, great. Can you be out here in 3 weeks? And I said, sure.
3 weeks.
So I gave my notice that night. I'm still not sure Georgette's forgiven me for that one, but I gave her 2 weeks. I went to Bordeaux for a week after that because I was already scheduled to go on an importer trip. And then I moved to California the day after I got back from Bordeaux.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I
would like in retrospect, are you stupid?
It's those decisions that when we get those bees in our bonnet that bug up our butt, when you're younger and you're much more agile, that you just do. And you're like, I would never make that decision now, but I'm so glad I did that then.
Yeah. I think it's different too. Like you have a family, obviously, to consider. I was single. I still have no kids, no mortgage. I have no pet. I have a fiance. But
congratulations.
Again, thank you. I think part of my ability to do things in life is my ability to remain nimble. And that's been a very conscious decision. And that's not, I think there's another side of me that would love to have a family and a mortgage and all those things. But right now, those are the things that allow me to do what it is I want to do. And even moving from California back east, that was, again, a very quick decision that we have thought and thought and thought. And then when an opportunity arose, it was like, we just pulled the trigger and went. But yeah, I think youth and just my own insistence on being flexible and nimble has been a huge key for me.
That's, I think, a huge, like, teasing out some of the things that have made you successful probably is the ability to be nimble, move back and forth across the country, be flexible, jump into new or other projects. And by the way, thank you for sharing some of your personal insights. We've gotten a little to know your dad, and now we know your fiance. By the way, my dad, we used to joke that he would order the Witté wine. The Witté.
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So I've noticed in doing the research that you're a very public figure and you keep your personal life pretty separate.
Yeah, it's definitely strategic. My sister is probably the only one that I have been comfortable sharing because she's comfortable sharing, but anybody else, I know that I subject myself to what I'm subjecting myself to. And it's not always pretty. Like most of the time, everything's super positive, but every now and then it's you open yourself up to that kind of thing. I've always felt that it's unfair to those around you who didn't ask for this life to also be subjected to that, whether the good and the bad of it all. And yes, for that reason, my family, my fiance, I've kept them very private. My mom comes to Aspen Food and Wine with me, and she actually loves the whole thing. So she's a little more public facing, but yeah, we try to keep that side of things. And also it's just like a protective measure for myself as well. It's like, there's just some things that are sacred. And when you put yourself out there in the way that I do, it's just easier to keep your personal and your professional life in two different places, like you would at work, right? Like you don't bring your whole personal life into work. You don't try not to bring your work into personal side of things. And so I've tried to remain
It's
balanced, but it's hard.
That's really thoughtful. And I got to imagine it's hard in this day and age. There's so much information about so many people. You really have to, and you do, that's right. In thinking about that, I think you have a nephew, right? And who's your godson. And that probably feeds you were saying at some point, there's a part of you that want to have a family. So that probably feeds your like nurturing motherly side, I guess.
Totally. It was one of the huge reasons that we moved back east was to be closer to them. So I have a niece and a nephew. That my nephew is also my godson. And yes, he turned 4 recently and is obsessed with marshmallows. And so I made him a marshmallow exploding cake, and he was very excited about that. So yeah.
It's another thing about the kids said they're obsessed with marshmallows. There must be some sort of thing. Maybe we need to do like a marshmallow and Moscato D'Asti event because
Yeah. They also love caviar, to be clear. Like these kids have a broad palate thanks to Auntie, but
I love that. I love introducing kids to new food and seeing their palates arise like that. Hey, when was the first time that you can remember being recognized as somm vivant outside of industry professionals?
I remember the first time that just absolutely blew my mind was actually at press. This guy came in by himself, the late seating. It was like an off night. It was like a Sunday or Monday or something. And we're like midway into the meal. And I forget, he must have ordered wine. And he said, he was German. And he said, hey, he said, I really like your videos. And it was this guy that like, I don't know who I thought was watching my videos, but this was not the picture that I had in my mind. And he was like, I love your videos. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, he was like, he was like some sort of chemist and he worked nights. And he was like, I keep your videos on while I'm like doing this chemistry. And he was living in, like I said, I think he was living in like Germany, like Munich or something. And he said, I love your videos. Thank you so much. And that was actually the first time that I was like, one, like somebody's watching this. And two, like when you learn that content, and you will probably encounter this if you haven't already, when you find that content is like moving outside of your immediate circle and is like getting into other places, like it is the wildest feeling to know that someone who you've no experience with, no connection to, in a completely other side of the world from you is attached to you in some way. That is just such a cool feeling. And so that was one of the first times I ever felt that, which it's obviously still, that was, I don't know, probably 8 years ago.
That is wild. And that must have been so validating to a point where you're thinking, okay, this is working. People are actually consuming this.
Yeah, it's validating as you work in front of a computer and sort of in a silo and without a lot of feedback for a long time. And so, yes, it feels nice to hear.
There's so many people in the wine space out there doing it right now. And everybody's got an Instagram channel. Everybody has a podcast, put out YouTube videos. What do you think are the things that have set you apart, have led you to the success?
Wish I knew. I don't know. I will say when I started,
I know let's put it this way. I know you're a Tim Ferriss fan and thinking this of like,
Ferriss fan.
yeah. And thinking about how he always teases out the like tricks and tips from his guests. Do that same thing.
Yeah, they say that nothing really beats just consistency and time, right? There is no substitute for that. And I think that's true at any level. Anybody can put out a podcast for a month. Anybody can put out their Instagram for a month, but talk to me in a year, talk to me in 3 years, talk to me in 5 years. The other thing that I would say is as much as you can do yourself. And that's not a cost saving mechanism as it is so much you will learn a lot about yourself and what you're good at and what you're not good at by editing yourself and understanding where you may have missed the mark, because when you have somebody edit your footage, you don't know what ended up on the cutting room floor. You don't know how, like, where you could have taken a left turn and you took a right instead. And so you learn a lot about yourself by editing. So I would say, as much as you can do that yourself, at least for the first few months or few years, I would definitely recommend that. Listen to your audience, but go into it with some sort of ethos. Like, for example, I went into it knowing that I was never going to put out a negative piece of content. I was never going to shit on a winery. I was never going to shit on anyone for doing anything or make fun of anyone, or at least unintentionally do that. And so that was my personal philosophy and ethos. And that's really helped guide me to say, is this adding value, or is this just feeding my own ego because I think it's funny, or I want someone to feel bad? And it helps to answer questions more easily down the way. So those would be my Tim Ferriss nuggets. Also, Tim Ferriss's good friend, Kevin Kelly, wrote a great essay back in 2008 called 1,000 True Fans, which I'm sure you're nodding your head familiar with. So this is a great way I have almost 300,000 followers on Instagram, but of that 300,000, who are the 1,000 true ones that will buy anything that I'm selling, who will listen to everything, who watch everything? Those are really the ones. Not that everyone doesn't matter, but when you're trying to figure out what you're doing, culling the herd and understanding, like finding those 1,000 true fans is the most important. So I definitely recommend giving that essay a read. It's amazing how it's continued to be relevant even into 2025.
1,000 true fans for sure. I so appreciate what you just said, although I'm angry with you for saying it, because it's like the editing thing is so time consuming.
I do get that.
And I so want to outsource that, but I agree with you. It's like there's a certain specific and special quality of when you're doing your own editing. Are you still to this day doing your own editing, or are you able now to give some of that up?
Yeah, the only thing I don't edit myself is the podcast, although I do usually give it a full listen in raw form before I send it over, just so I know what to look for. But no, all of my videos I edit myself. I do not outsource those because
That's impressive. How did you learn? And because back in the day, like now editing, there's so many.
I know I've gone from $5,000 worth of gear to my iPhone, which is crazy. I learned to edit through YouTube. I just watched like a million tutorials on how to do it. I had some friends who also did some editing that every now and then, if I'd hit a roadblock, I'd be like, what's this render thing? Like, I render a video. So I'd phone a friend. But yeah, mostly I would watch anything I possibly could. I would recommend, if Marcos Rocha, who I ended up working with, and he actually shot a few videos for me, he focuses more on Final Cut, which is actually my favorite editing software. A lot of professionals will use like Adobe and DaVinci, but I think if you're an Apple user and you're someone who likes the intuition-based whatever they do, that's a much better program. I think it's easier to learn. It's a little bit more limiting than Adobe, but I record now everything basically on my iPhone. I've got these little Rode mics. These are lav mics that plug either right into my laptop or into my iPhone. So everything gets recorded there. I have a tripod, a light, and then I upload everything to Final Cut. I edit and color grade, and out she goes. And then I add captions in InShot. So
That's amazing, because all of your stuff obviously now looks so professional and well done, and obviously a good part of your success. Yes,
you can learn anything on the internet. It's crazy.
I know. You're right. You're right. And they do make it easy these days with editing software and stuff like that. A lot easier than I'm sure when you started. Final Cut Pro is like a pros.
Totally. Yeah. If you only had an iPhone and the InShot app or CapCut or even iMovie, you're totally good.
Is there a metric that is the single most important metric that you focus on, or how often do you look or focus on metrics?
They meant more to me like when I was first started. Like, I used to think that if I could just get to 50,000 followers, I'd be great. And then it was 100. And I quickly realized after you hit those marks that like they're fairly meaningless. Like, there's no parade thrown in your honor.
You have to throw the parade yourself.
So you have to throw the parade yourself. I will say I have a pretty nice cathartic moment a few weeks ago. So I announced a partnership with Crate and Barrel, which I felt like was a big deal to me, because it was obviously Crate and Barrel is a company outside the wine industry. And I'm their 2025 resident wine expert. And so when I announced that, and the feedback that I got from that, from like both friends and followers and people I'd never met that I knew who I was, that was it's not a metric, but like I would say the comments and the DMs that I got are more valuable than probably anything else. And getting the amount of feedback that congrats on your like deserved success. And this was like earned, things like that. In my mind, but seeing it at that scale was incredibly meaningful. And I had I'm not a very emotional person. Like I'm made fun of often because I only cry about 3 times a year. But that was what.
Very cool. Okay, we'll get out of here on one last question. I think you probably maybe even answered this, but can you just tell us some of your last couple of standout bottles of wine or anything that you drank recently that has been memorable?
Yeah. The Eagles won the Super Bowl. I don't know.
Wow. Wow. That's it. This interview is done.
I'm born and raised Philly girl. I bleed green. So that was like before they won, the week leading up, I opened some wines in honor of some of the players in Coach Sirianni's birth year. So I opened a 97 Turley Dogtown Vineyard for Saquon Barkley, who was born in 97. I opened a 98 Smith Oak Lafitte for Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith. And then I opened a 1980 Caparzo Brunello de Montalcino. And those are super fun to open, super fun to drink. I opened them and then put a re-pour in them and had them on the day of the Super Bowl. So those were 3 wines that were just like, they were just killer. And we had like classic cheesesteaks, hoagies, like Philly food. And they were so good together and they were like fun to drink that day. And we had hoagie martinis as well, which is a whole other sidebar. But
wait, what's in a hoagie martini? Hold on. What's in a hoagie martini?
It's all the herbs and spices that one would find in a hoagie.
Okay.
I basically infuse there's these marinated tomatoes that get marinated in like oregano and thyme and garlic. And so I infused some gin. I'm a gin drinker over vodka. So I infused some gin with that. And then I did basically freeze it to render the fat off of it, or fat washed it, I guess is what they call it. So I fat washed it and then strained it and added a little bit of like olive oil. And then we garnished with some like mortadella and olives and served that with our hoagie martini.
Like on a little stick. Sounds amazing. I guess I would drink one of those with
3
you.
wines and a martini.
Even though you know I'm a Giants fan, but that's okay. Congratulations. You're welcome for saying.
I'm sorry for the Giants. I grew up when the Eagles sucked like horribly. And so yes, today, like we really just soak it all in. Now we've had some years of success, which I know eventually will come to an end, but I'm super proud of my birds.
Yep. Congratulations. I'm going to take the high road here. That's cool. Amanda, this has been so much.
I drink a bottle of 2013 rare champagne out of a Yeti tumbler on the day of the parade too. That feels worth noting.
That's so cool. Thank you for sharing all of this and giving us the inside information into what the life of one of the top influencers in the wine game is doing and letting us know all about it. I really appreciate it. So for all of you out there, make sure you follow Amanda. Go follow Somm Vivant on Instagram and all the socials, and you will learn about eating and drinking deliciously.
Thanks so much for having me.